So I'd like to thank you all for coming today. What I'm going to be doing over the next half an hour, 40 minutes, is trying to talk about the future of computing, which is a very difficult thing to do. I am a computer scientist and a lecturer in computing, but I do want to put a disclaimer on the front: I don't know everything. So this is my opinion about certain things that are going to be big parts of the future of computing from my perspective. So, to start off then, this is kind of an inspirational, aspirational thing that I use quite often. As far as I'm concerned, computing and computer science, they are the future of everything. Now, it's part of my day job to say that. It's part of what I do, but I honestly, truly believe this. I think that computing is everything to everyone, everywhere. Or at least it could be. This is part of the vision that we're trying to bring to life here in Bradford and computer scientists around the world as well. But there are so many potential benefits and wonderful positive things that can come from computing, from computers, computing devices, that can benefit everybody in everything they do in their everyday lives. We just need to make sure that these things do benefit everybody around the world, and that we're creative and imaginative in the applications that we come up with, that we try and say, this everyday aspect of life, driving to work, walking around the building, eating my lunch, what could I do with computers to make this better? That's the dream I have. Everybody's thinking, oh, I can make an app for this, or I could put some computers on this and make it better. So if you agree with me, hopefully, that computer science is definitely the future, then the question is, well, what's the future for computer science? Now, there are some obvious future developments. Computer devices, they're going to get smaller, and they've been doing this ever since they were first created, right from Charles Babbage's difference engine, which was huge, from sort of mainframe computer rooms that took up entire basements of buildings. Now we have computers that are so tiny and so powerful that they fit inside smartphones and are hugely more powerful than, this is the anecdote, the technology in my smartphone is hundreds or thousands of times better and faster than the computers that were on the first Apollo missions that went to the moon and into space. Imagine where we'll be in sort of 40, 50 years' time when we'll be looking back at smartphones and thinking, wow, that was a old-fashioned era that they were in then. So devices are going to get smaller, a lot smaller, a lot bigger, longer battery lives, and a lot more capacity to perform the same kinds of tasks in a much, much smaller space. Obviously, computers are going to get faster as well. This is Moore's law. Some of you may have heard of Moore's law. The number of transistors that chip manufacturers can fit in a given space doubles every 18 months. Doesn't quite hold true anymore. They've kind of downgraded that to every 2 years now. So things get twice as fast every 2 years. But again, that's slowing down a little bit as well. But we are kind of reaching the limits of not what we need good hardware for, but we need more, better software and better algorithms now. And we'll talk more about that later on. So things are going to get smaller, things are going to get faster, and they will get more prevalent, more ubiquitous. There will be more computers everywhere. The word ubiquitous is commonly used in the sentence ubiquitous computing. It literally means computers everywhere, everywhere. Science fiction talks about computers. I don't want to spoil some of the things I'm talking about later, but computers in the walls, hundreds, thousands of them in the floors, in the air, in everything that we do, every device, every object coated in computers, very, very small scale computers. And while we're probably a long way off that, even in the next sort of 10, 15 years, we will see computing devices in more and more situations that perhaps we wouldn't think of today. So, if we're talking here about small, fast devices, lots and lots and lots of them, and we're assuming that we have wireless technology to connect these things together, what does this actually mean? What we're essentially talking about here is kind of an internet of things, objects. Everyday objects connected together wirelessly with computing devices embedded in them or at their heart, at their core. And this term, Internet of Things, is quite commonly used these days. It's referring to this idea of everyday objects being aware of their surroundings, connected to the internet and able to communicate and perhaps even take actions based on information that flows to them. So the question that pops up there is, well, what is the Internet of Things? Well, obviously it revolves around the internet, and today in our homes and in our places of work, we connect to the internet through devices, we call them routers now, mostly wireless, sometimes wired in work environments, but at home we pretty much all use wireless technology. And we connect to the internet and we browse the web, we watch YouTube videos and things. And some people do things, social media, don't quite know what that is. Yeah, people do use the internet for these things apparently. But the Internet of Things, going forward into, okay, well, the very near future, this is less people browsing on computers and looking at social media, and more things like your fridge, your oven, your cooker, your household Hoover, Roomba things that run around, being connected to the internet. And the example here is the fridge. The idea being that the fridge can know what's inside it through some mechanism, we'll talk about that later on, and perhaps on the front have a display that says, did you know you could make this meal out of the ingredients inside me? And it's healthy and nutritious because your doctor says that your body mass index is a little bit higher than it should be. So intelligent fridges that nag us and remind us about our diet and our health and things like this, or help us out with information, maybe the milk that you're running out of is on sale. We're also talking about ideas like connecting our cars to the internet. Again, there are pushes in this direction, not just for entertainment, but also for information, traffic information, GPS obviously being integrated into the car. But going a bit beyond that, your car, for example, registering how you're holding onto the steering wheel, seeing that you're getting a little bit tired and suggesting there's a rest stop coming up in 17 miles and it has a McDonald's because I know you like McDonald's and you don't like these alternatives. So do you want to pull off here and get some rest? And again, devices perhaps not running our lives but helping us with our lives. There are also ideas around, the icon that's just popped up is supposed to represent a thermostat, something that can measure temperature, because there are pushes today for smart homes where you can use your smartphone to say, I'm coming home a bit early, it's very cold outside, I'd like the heating to be on when I get home, I'd like it to be exactly 22 degrees when I walk in the door. Your connected smartphone can talk to your Internet of Things connected thermostat and boiler and central heating system at home, and make your desire happen for when you roll up in your smart connected car, so you can walk into your warm home. All of these things exist today, though. So this is not the future of the Internet of Things. This is the reality today. The smart refrigerator actually exists. I'll leave you to Google that later on. But there are more things in this: smart television, smart mirrors as well that can overlay clothes on top of you. These things actually exist today as well. But the question is, what about tomorrow? What will tomorrow bring, and next year and the next decade, for the Internet of Things? Well, I'd like you to imagine this situation. This is a shop, okay, that's just appeared on the screen. Imagine that it's a supermarket, okay? You're in the supermarket, you're walking around, you're putting things into your trolley, okay, collecting them in, and you take your trolley and you walk straight out of the supermarket and you unload all of these things into your car. And you take your car and you drive home. Now, at no point in that sequence of events did I say anything about paying for the goods that you had just taken from the supermarket and put into your car. So today, what I'm describing there, that would make you a criminal. You would have just stolen a lot of merchandise from that supermarket. But in the future, if the Internet of Things ideas that people are kind of coming up with now come to life, then you won't be a criminal at all. You'll just be an everyday normal human being. Because every item in that supermarket, every tin on the shelf, every box, every little chocolate bar, whatever it is, will be connected to the Internet of Things. We'll have tiny, tiny devices in the wrappings, in the packaging, so cheap that they can be thrown away or recycled, It literally will be that small and that cheap. So every item, every piece of food and whatever in that supermarket will be aware, connected to the internet, knowing where it is, because the supermarket will have beacons, locating devices inside it. Your car as well will be able to say, you're inside now. You were in the supermarket on the shelf, and now you're inside my boot. And your home will say, oh, welcome home. The fridge is over here. Jump in and meet the other groceries. Not literally. And the idea there is that you'll be able to be charged by the supermarket as you drive away. As soon as it has become clear that these are the things you're taking away, you won't need to go through a checkout. It will all have been kind of logged and monitored as you're leaving, and your credit card will be charged, or your bank account directly, as you leave. Very smart, very simple, very technically possible today, really, but it's a little bit expensive to do these kinds of things at the minute. We need things to get smaller and faster. There are other potential benefits, and what I've tried to focus on here are examples around kind of you and me, our homes, everyday things like buying food into the supermarket and so on. But there are a lot of examples that happen away from the home. But what I've tried to focus on are things that we can think of now and could probably achieve in the reasonably near future. So I don't know if this happens to many of you very commonly, but occasionally I lose my keys. I don't know where they are. I have small children and they love taking keys and kind of disappearing off with them and then laughing when I ask them where they are. So what occurred to me was I would love to be able to have everything I own tagged, located, connected to the Internet of Things, things like my keys, so that I could lose them somewhere in my house. They disappear. You may be able to see them if you have very sharp eyes. But I could ask my phone or even ask my house, where are the keys? And the keys would be able to reply back, well, actually, we're located here. We're exactly 17 inches from this beacon. We're exactly 13 feet from this beacon. We know exactly where that means we are. We're down the back of the sofa. So come find us and get on with your everyday business. Again, all these things are technically possible right now, but again, a little bit maybe too expensive based on the cost of these devices. Now, the next idea is based on a project that is actually being worked on right now in the AI research group at the University of Bradford. I can't go into huge amounts of detail about all the potential for it because it's still commercially sensitive. But the bigger picture things are kind of public information now. So the image that's just popped up, the big green box, is supposed to be a recycling bin. Okay, depending on where you come from in the world, you may be your governments may be very, very into recycling, kind of in the middle, or maybe the idea of kind of domestic recycling is not particularly new. But in the UK, there are huge amounts of local councils, government representatives, and so on, that really want recycling to be at the heart of what we do. So in many, many places in the UK, we have weekly or every other week, we have big collections of bins that have recycling inside them, things like glass bottles, plastic bags, and so on. So imagine that in the future, your recycling bin outside your house is not just a container for objects, is almost intelligent, has sensors inside it, the ability to communicate with things on the internet, with other bins, with the local council, able to say, as a bin, I'm getting kind of full right now. Wouldn't it be nice if someone would come and collect me? And maybe being able to talk to other bins in the area and come to some kind of agreement that, yeah, there's enough rubbish here for a collection to be justified. So a message can be sent from your local neighbourhood to the local council, and the local council can send out some people to collect the rubbish. The idea here is that we can have more frequent collections, but smaller collections, using smaller vehicles and maybe less staff. So we can save money, we can do less harm to the environment, and maybe we can do very, very, very clever things like have recycling that is not just this neighbourhood is collected this week, but we can have dynamic collections. You know, maybe there are certain areas where you only need to come once every 3 months because people just don't drink and they don't use plastic packaging. Or maybe you can be smarter about it and say, well, these bins are always overflowing. We need more frequent collection here. Another potential application of the Internet of Things, you may recognize the image there. The top part of it is supposed to be a drone, a quadcopter drone. At the moment, a lot of these things are kind of driven by people with remote controls, or they have their smartphones where you can control these things and see live image from a camera on the drone. But there are many companies, Amazon, primary amongst them, but others as well, who have talked about and are even trialing in certain countries delivery of packages and post and similar sorts of things by drone. So the theory is that these drones can be sent out from a fulfillment center or a depot somewhere and bring these packages to your home and leave them there, leave them in your back garden, or even ask you via a smartphone app, I'm ready to fly, where are you, where do you want your package, I can drop it with you at work, or who knows, maybe even hover over you as you're driving home and drop it through your sunroof if we got really fancy with it. But again, this is pretty much today. The future, though, is that this drone is, again, connected to the Internet of Things, has better batteries than we have today, and can perhaps be negotiated with by your house, where your house says, well, the person that lives here, they're not in at the moment, but they have packages that need to be taken away. They run their own business, or they want to return something to your company, for example. Could you take this package, the customer's package, not the one you just delivered, but a different one, could you take this with you and drop it here, and the owner of this house will pay you a small fee, or it will be deducted from their Amazon account or whatever. So a network of intelligent delivery devices taking packages that are connected again to the Internet of Things. They know where they are, they know where they're supposed to be, and can negotiate their own travel maybe. So that we have kind of a more connected, more seamless society with less waste, less objects, vans, drones or whatever, going places empty, not using all the capacity we have today. So all these things, these are applications of the Internet of Things that are not very personal. They're about your home, your work, about businesses. But there are many potential benefits to an Internet of Things that is more personal. Okay, and anyone that's ever been to the University of Bradford for a recruitment event, you'll have heard me say some of these things before. But I can see a future where the clothes that you wear are connected to the Internet, which sounds crazy, but bear with me. For example, my shirt today, under these hot lights, could say, you're sweating a little bit more than normal, Paul, but I'll allow that because it's warm in here. But did you know that the sweat that you're producing has an unusual amount of toxins inside it? You had a takeaway last night. I'm connecting the dots here, and this is my shirt talking here. I'm connecting the dots. Did you know that the takeaway you went to lost some hygiene stars? It's gone downhill. It's got worse in terms of its hygiene in the last month. Maybe there's a connection. Maybe there's something for you to think about there. The shoes as well could talk about how you're walking, and did you know that the medical condition in your back is getting worse because there's less balance in your the way you're walking. Again, not into sort of science fiction territory yet, but we'll get there very soon. Getting there now. What about devices connected to the Internet, computers, under your skin? So that instead of having a watch on my wrist, a physical device, I would have something kind of like a tattoo, something injected into my skin that could form a screen and respond to touches and be kind of like these smart watches that Apple and other companies are making now, connected to my phone, able to show me messages and allow me to navigate places. But it's actually part of my body and can do more than just a device like this can. It can monitor my heart rate, my breathing, my skin toxicity, my temperature, and so on, and make suggestions or provide me with information. So these things, again, we're getting into science fiction there, and we're getting further into the future. But how about this? How about computational devices connected, again, to the Internet of Things inside your body? I'm not talking pacemakers. Again, these things exist, and some of them are wirelessly enabled these days. But what about tiny little medical devices in your blood, so small that you couldn't see them with the human eye? Devices that could do things like filter out toxins from your blood. So, okay, if you drink alcohol, you don't suffer any ill effects because these devices can filter these things out. Or if you had a heart transplant or a liver or a kidney transplant, these devices could help your body understand that these things were friendly and not something to be rejected by intervening in the way the human body's defences, immune system works. Again, this is pretty much science fiction, but you know the things that exist today were science fiction in the 60s and 70s and 80s. So maybe within our lifetimes, and maybe within your lifetime if you're younger than me, these things may be a reality. Okay, so what I'm talking about here, and I must say, originally on this slide I wrote billions of devices, and then I thought, no, that's not actually very ambitious, is it? There are billions of people in the world, and I'd like to think that there would be more than just 1 or 2 devices connected to the internet for every person. So I changed it to trillions of devices. It could be further than that. I couldn't actually think of the word beyond trillions. So anyway, but at least trillions of devices, all of them producing data, all of them recording where they are and what they're doing at a rather rapid rate. And they're doing this all of the time. What this means is we're going to be left with a lot of data. A lot of data. Lots and lots of data. So much data that it becomes very hard to understand what's happening. The data obscures itself. It becomes impossible to understand easily. And this brings me quite nicely onto a topic that I'm reasonably familiar with, the topic of data science. This is the second of my kind of guesses, educated guesses if you like, about what the future of computing holds. So the big question again is, what is data science? Well, it's the science of data, obviously, but there are many different aspects to it. So one of the main ones today is about data management and curation. The idea of, like a curator of a museum, looking after your data, making sure it's in the right place, it's signposted correctly, labelled up, and that people can access it and use it for whatever they want. So that's a big aspect, but not one I'm particularly interested in. We're moving more in towards what I consider to be hopefully an area of expertise for me, data analytics, being able to take the data that devices today and in the future are producing and do some basic analysis of them. What are the trends over time? What are the averages? What's the variation in this data? Maybe to put it into a kind of a visual style and say, look, here's a pretty graphic that shows you how your business works or the wasted capacity in your manufacturing facilities or whatever. And again, this is great, but this is today. We can do pretty good data analytics now. What I like and what the subject of my thesis was about is data mining. Actually being able to dig into data, explore it, and make some sense out of it, discover something that perhaps we didn't know before. So data mining is essentially all about spotting patterns in data. Finding the patterns, seeing if they go on forever, if we can extend them. So I crafted something that is, well, I was going to say random numbers, but you can see where I'm going with this. It's not random numbers at all. It's a bunch of numbers where there are some perhaps hidden patterns or patterns that are harder to see initially. Oh, a big diagonal line of 9s, whatever that means. 1, 9, 1, 8, 1, 7, fantastic. 5, 8, 5, 8, 5, 8, 5. All these kinds of patterns, okay, they don't mean anything in this kind of random numbers that we're looking at here. But this is essentially a very abstract version of what we're doing when we're doing data mining. We're looking for patterns, things that we can follow and analyze and try and make sense of. So making it a little bit more real, if we have data where we're looking at how long something lasts and delays between these things. This data here is public open data, and I believe it's about the eruptions from a geyser, a hole in the ground in America where hot water and steam erupt quite regularly. Some of you may have heard of Old Faithful, and this is in one of the national parks in America. And this is about the eruptions from that geyser. So can we take this information and start to make some sense of it, start to do things like apply groups on top of it? Say we have a kind of a split in the data here. This initial grouping and what we call clustering, trying to find groups of points in the data that are quite obviously, in this case, you can see it with your own eyes, they're in clusters, they're in groups. But when we move beyond two-dimensional data to data where we have hundreds of different pieces of information that we're measuring, we can't do this kind of clustering with our eyes. It has to be done with advanced software algorithms. So we can start to make groups, we can start to make sense of this and try and understand the different groupings there. One of the other major sort of common themes in data science and in data mining is what's called time series analysis. So much of the data that we see every day is data that has measurements throughout time. So from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, throughout the year and so on. And we can try and start to see patterns in this. Now the one that you can see now, hopefully is a pretty obvious pattern in there, and if I were to give you a pencil and ask you to carry on and draw the rest of it, I hope that you'd be able to at least have a good guess at the shape of the future data there. But most data doesn't fit into that kind of nice shape. A lot of real data looks like this. This is the Shahel Rainfall Index. It doesn't really matter what that means too much. But we can see this is the last 110 years of data about rainfall. And a lot of real-world data will have this kind of shape to it, where there are quite big variations year upon year, day to day, whatever it is. But there are some trends, some patterns that we can kind of pull out, or at least some observations we can make. For example, in here, the difference between 1970, before and after, is pretty stark and pretty easy to see. But again, if I asked you to predict what was going to happen in 2025, that might be a harder thing to interpret, because there are some interesting up and down slopes happening here. So there are some advanced algorithms and pieces of software out there to try and make sense of this information and allow us to predict things. Essentially, this is what data mining is all about. It's about being able to take information, take data, and process it, combine it, apply some knowledge somewhere, and make a decision about how we should proceed or what we should be doing. So what we have on the screen now is, some of you may recognize this, it's a neural network, which is a tool for making predictions about data, maybe about the future as well, based on the human brain. So taking something that was created by nature and trying to create it within a computer. So we can do some basic things here. We can plug some numbers into the kind of inputs of this neural network, and these numbers will flow through the network, be processed, be not manipulated, but there'll be a lot of calculations going on there. And we'll produce an output. So in this very made up and boring example, these inputs produce this output. Not very helpful. But what about if the inputs to our neural network were real world conditions? Maybe this neural network is running in our car that drives itself. And it decides that, okay, it's snowing pretty heavily, and there's a lot of heavy traffic, probably because it's snowing. So I'm going to drive my owner on the motorway today, because otherwise we'll be stuck in traffic forever. But maybe a few weeks or months later, the same neural network is presented with different information. Information that today it's very sunny and the traffic is very, very light. So why don't we have a bit of fun? Take my owner somewhere a little bit picturesque. I'll take them over the mountain pass. That in the snow probably would have been quite dangerous. So again, these are very simple, low-level examples. Neural networks and models for prediction in data mining can get a lot more advanced and a lot more detailed than this, but this is hopefully a relatable example. So there are lots of applications for data science. Things that we do today, companies again like Amazon, it kind of sounds like I work for Amazon, but I don't, I just buy things from them. But companies like Amazon and others, they try to predict our behavior. So they look at what we're buying, what we're browsing, and they have human beings, but more and more software, saying things like, well, you bought some nappies, so can we interest you in this lovely selection of baby toys? Or you bought nappies, would you like some wipes to go with that? And we can put a deal together for you. This is pretty basic, what's called basket analysis. If people bought these things, then they'll probably also buy these things. But again, going forward into the future, there's a very big focus around human health for obvious reasons. People want to live longer and better. So human health is a big focus for these things. And in the realm of data science, it's no different. So there are applications here, things like maybe your shirt or your clothes or the sensors in your skin or whatever it is, might be able to say things, do calculations like, Over the last week, the average rate that your heart is beating has increased by nearly 20%, and you've been sweating pretty much constantly for a week. Let's do some analytics on this. Let's look at what people in the past have been suffering from when they have these symptoms. Maybe you'd like to make an appointment with your doctor and ask them about this particular condition, which you're showing a lot of the symptoms for. At the minute, we rely on human beings and some fairly basic software solutions to make these kinds of diagnoses. But we could be much better at this if we had more connected information about people's health. There are other health applications as well, not so much maybe around your heart and your skin and things like this, but around looking for patterns like this. Where you're traveling, when you travel, the mechanism that you travel, do you go by car or train? These are things have suddenly changed very, very rapidly. The places that you're going on the internet and the way you browse and maybe even the way you use your mouse and keyboard are changing and have changed very, very rapidly. The way you sleep has changed significantly and rapidly, and you're not sleeping for very long at all, and you're sleeping in a different room in the house. All of these things maybe point to the fact that we need to make a mental health intervention. Maybe some algorithm somewhere would notify you, maybe even directly notify your doctor or the local health authority that you're displaying the signs of the onset of some kind of mental illness, and that maybe someone needs to come and try and give you some assistance and some help. Or maybe you're traveling different places, you're not sleeping very well, and you're looking up unusual things on the internet. Maybe you just had a baby. So we need to be very intelligent about the way these algorithms work and not jump to any conclusions. Now, the main challenges around data science, they focus around the 3 V's. Okay, data volume, data velocity, and data variety. So data volume obviously is the size of data, the amount of data that we're having to process or deal with on a day-to-day basis. The velocity of data is how quickly data is being produced. And when we're talking about trillions of devices all producing data all the time, that can be a lot of information flowing in very, very fast indeed. And if we're talking about devices in everything, everywhere, we also get into the variety of data. We'll have data about everything, from every walk of life, the quality of the air, how quickly Paul's talking in his presentation, the travel patterns of trucks in Australia, all sorts of things like this, all potentially being tied together to produce some kind of insight. All of these things add up to the concepts that we call big data. Data that is so large, so diverse, and so unceasing that we can't use normal hardware and software to make any kind of sense of it at all. We have to have specialized hardware, specialized tools, specialized software. Now, some of you may have heard of software, things like Hadoop, free open source frameworks for doing what we call big data analysis, big data mining, where we're talking billions and billions and billions of records potentially, measurements every split second over the course of a year or something. Things like the people at the Large Hadron Collider are having to look at. Huge amounts of observations about millions or billions of particles in these collisions that they're inducing. They need some pretty specialized tools to do that, and I doubt Hadoop even cuts it for that. There are also algorithms, things like MapReduce, again, a big part of Hadoop and other pieces of software that can help us coordinate and manage data that's spread across hundreds of servers, hundreds of storage devices, and can allow us to do analysis on these things all together and fairly rapidly. What we're talking about here then is a world of data, and sometimes this is kind of how I see the world. I see the world based on information. Some of you may have heard of a film called The Matrix, where people could see the world in computer code. I kind of see the world in data sometimes, how fast things are traveling, and you know, the properties and the materials that things are made of. But essentially, if we're talking about a world where we're looking at data all of the time, we'll be drowning or flooded with data. The thing about a world full of data, made up of data, is that data can be very, very valuable. Knowledge about who you are, your interests, the things that you buy, the amount of money that you'd be willing to pay for things, just as an example. This is incredibly valuable information to marketing companies, to commercial businesses. Data can be incredibly valuable, even things not as obvious as passwords and bank account details, but say your habits, your preferences and interests. And the question then is, well, what do people do with valuable things? Some good things, but the answer that unfortunately sprung to my mind first is that people steal valuable things. They want to take them and use them for whatever purposes that they have in mind. So this brings us on quite nicely from data to the idea of cyber security. And I looked this up very carefully. It is now technically one word. Cyber security, a relatively new term all about securing data on computing devices, on the internet, and increasingly as we go forward in the future on all of these connected devices that will be in our cars, in our houses, maybe in our bodies as well. Securing them, making them defended against attacks and able to help us without helping our enemies, if you put it that way. So I'd like to just talk about a couple of quick examples of cybersecurity in the news recently. Unless you've been hiding under a rock, you can't have failed to notice, I'm sure, the Mossack Fonseca, checking that very carefully, this Panamanian company leaking information, not leaking actually, having information stolen about tax havens, offshore, not tax evasion, definitely not, that would be a criminal offence. This is avoidance, which is perfectly legal, we're assured, but people having tax havens. It's embarrassed a lot of people. Was it the Prime Minister, not the President, I think the Prime Minister of Iceland was pretty much forced to resign by the masses in Iceland because of his historic financial history. The Prime Minister of the UK had to answer some pretty difficult questions about his tax history and that of his father. And there are a lot of people around the world that have got some difficult things to talk about now. Now, this information was not stolen by an employee, as far as we're aware. It was not an Edward Snowden moment, This was stolen in a much more old-fashioned way, if you like. There was a security breach. It turns out that, allegedly, that company were using pretty out-of-date software. They were using something called WordPress, that you may have heard of, to be part of their customer-facing website offerings, and Drupal, again very much tied into that idea. And what's not in the headline here, they were using Outlook 2009 for allegedly for their internal email. All of these things were pretty much totally out of date, which is why someone, whoever it was, found it not trivially easy, but pretty easy indeed, to go in and access their internal servers and just grab all this data. So exploits that were not human-driven, but were just technologically driven here. So some pretty embarrassing stuff, some pretty high-impact leaks based on out-of-date software. It's pretty frightening, really. The other story I'll go through fairly rapidly because I'm aware of the time going on. Again, a big story in the news recently was the FBI versus Apple. Okay, making it sound a bit more confrontational than it perhaps actually was, but it was pretty heated debate. If you're not aware of this, the FBI were requesting that Apple unlock the phone of a terrorism suspect. They wanted to find out who this person had been talking to and if they could potentially save lives by finding some information on this phone. Now, this whole story brought out a lot of questions, a lot of debate on cybersecurity against privacy, digital privacy and personal privacy. So there were lots of people talking about the ethics of this. Were Apple ethically right in refusing to unlock this phone? People were talking about national security a lot. Well, of course they should unlock it because this is about national security. This is about saving lives, potentially. We don't know, but we suspect it could be about saving lives. Other people were saying, well, this sets a very dangerous precedent. If the government can spy on their citizens, unlock their phones whenever they like and see who they've been talking to and why, then okay, if it's to potentially stop a terrorist attack, maybe that's justified. But what about if it was to stop a mass murderer? Or what about if it was to stop a murderer? Or what about if it was to stop someone from committing tax fraud? What about someone who's committed a driving offence? What about someone who's just acting a little bit suspiciously? How far do you go with this? Where do you draw the line? So this was the kind of debate, and is always an ongoing debate around cybersecurity. If we give people the tools to communicate completely privately, how can that be misused? And how do we balance that against people's right to privacy within their own homes and on the internet? So it's a very difficult and potentially dangerous debate to get into. But all of this leads into the question of, well, why is cybersecurity seemingly more important than it's ever been? Why is it that every other story on the news these days is about a data leak somewhere, about a hack, about embarrassing information being stolen from companies, or valuable information being stolen from companies? Well, this is mainly due to us, human beings. We like the internet. We've embraced it in a relatively short amount of time. And we like things to be online now. We like our services to be connected. I like to be able to, quite literally, and this was happening to me yesterday, be sat at my laptop collaborating with someone. And as I get up to go to the kitchen to get a drink, continuing the same conversation literally on my smartphone, seamlessly, being able to see the same view at the same time, and perhaps doing two things at once, phone and keyboard. These things kind of appeal to me in a kind of computer science geeky way. But people want more and more things online. They want their banking to be online. They don't want to have to go into a physical bank anymore. They want to be able to pay their bills with their computer, of course. They want to have their music and their films that they purchased or downloaded or whatever to be available online. They want to be able to watch them on their phone, pause it, and then turn on their television and have their television resume the film from exactly the same point. They want to play their games online with other human beings because games AI is not particularly brilliant right now. Little wink to George there. Hopefully going to make it better. Social interaction as well. People, again, want to use this thing called social media to talk to their friends and communicate with relatives and friends that they can't see every day because they perhaps live far away from them. People want their central heating to be online and connected. People want their cars to be online and connected. People want their medical devices to be online and connected, do they? There's a bigger and bigger push for this, for smart connected devices in hospitals, for pacemakers, for implants to be connected and aware of their own battery lives and things like this. And it's where all of these things intersect on the internet, all based around security. This is where it gets pretty dangerous and tricky. So if someone interrupts my online gaming and I don't know, closes my session or pretends to be me in a game, okay, it's annoying, it's not potentially that disastrous. If they mess about with my central heating, it could be pretty tricky, but I can turn it off if I want and turn fire on. If people get onto my Facebook, that's maybe a little bit more annoying. If people start to mess with my medical devices, hack into them, interrupt their operation, the operation of my car, of its braking systems, the engine itself. If people get into my online banking, these things are potentially much more important and have a bigger impact on me than some of these other situations. So again, it's a very complicated world out there. Cybersecurity is a very complicated thing. There are many, many aspects to it. And while I've tried to put some of them up here, this is by no means all of the aspects of cybersecurity. So there are things like the technological side of it, the hardware and the software, the ways that we can make these things better or come up with ideas, algorithms, protocols, the way things communicate and so on. But there's very much the other side of that, the human side of things, the psychological aspects, the biological aspects, the way my body works. Excuse me. And the psychology and the biological side of things, these come into questions like, why do people fall for phishing scams? Why do people click on these links in emails? And when we're talking about biological things, can we actually use fingerprints to authenticate a human being? We have banks that are proposing that taking a selfie with your phone is a good security measure because the the application will say smile and wink, and we won't be able to do that with a picture. Interesting ideas, definitely. Excuse me. There are also commercial aspects. Cybersecurity and things like data leaks, data breaches, these have a big impact on things like share prices for companies, so it's very big business to prevent the loss of customer trust and the stealing of trade secrets and so on. All of these things kind of revolve around cybersecurity, but they also very much relate to the idea of cybersecurity defense. The technological defense, the training of human beings, and again, software and algorithms to make encryption better, to make sure that if data is stolen, it can't just be easily understood or understood ever. And there are aspects around deterrence as well, the legal side of things. And while I am in a building full of legal experts at the minute, it's definitely not my area of expertise. So to round this all up, I've spoken today about the Internet of Things, about data science, about cybersecurity, at a fairly high level. I haven't gone too deep. We're talking trillions of devices, all connected together, all producing data, all potentially vulnerable to attack, to interception, and to exploitation by people who want to do maybe bad things. But the one thing that is common to the Internet of Things, to data science, to cybersecurity, and so many more things that we deal with here every day, they're all computer science, or heavily influenced by computer science. But again, it all revolves around people. The thing that's common to all of these is that good graduates with skills in the right area can make a huge difference to these topics and to their future. And what I always say to people that come to see us in the university, maybe apply to our courses, I present them a choice. You can be part of this future. You can be the person that decides what the future of the Internet of Things is, or why cybersecurity is terrible at the minute and how we should make it better, by maybe embracing computer science, maybe studying it, coming to Bradford and learning about it, or you can leave it to other people. It's up to you. So these three things, these are three key concepts, three things that I'm pretty sure will form a big part of the future of computing, but there is so much more. There is so much more to computing than just these three ideas. And these are kinds of focuses and specialities that we're building here within computer science at the University of Bradford. But there is so much more to this subject, which is why I love it quite so much as I do. Okay, in the words of Monty Python, and now for something completely different. If you only came today to hear my maybe random musings about the future of computing, thank you very much. The rest of this presentation, fairly short because we want a bit of time for questions, will be based around courses and a bit of information there. So I'm going to go through now some information about what we offer and some of the opportunities here. But if you decide that that's of no interest to you, thank you very much for your attention. Please do contact us with any questions. If you do want to stick around and ask questions at the end of this presentation, we should be done in a few minutes here with this information as well. So firstly, a very brief word about the courses, the undergraduate courses that we offer here at the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. We have a pretty diverse range of courses. We have fairly general courses like computer science with a good degree of optionality where you can choose topics and modules, right through to fairly specialised courses in subjects like ICT with business, software engineering, and computer science with specific applications like business and gaming. Excuse me, tickling my throat. This is our kind of undergraduate offerings, okay, but do watch this space. We're always looking to innovate and update our programs, so if you want to be absolutely sure that you're seeing the latest information, get in touch with us, come to our website, okay, and you'll be able to see up-to-the-minute information. We also offer a range of postgraduate courses. We have things that we internally call computing conversion courses, courses for people who have not necessarily studied computing before, but we go right through to some very advanced courses, quite specialised courses in things like big data science and technology, cybersecurity as well, and the staple things like advanced computer science and software engineering. So if you do want to know any more about these courses, let us know, we can provide you with information. Now, we are a research-active university. We're very proud of our research, and our aim is to embed the research that we do as lecturers, senior lecturers and professors, into the teaching that we do. So particularly in the sort of final stages of your degree, undergraduate or master's, you'll be exposed to a world of research. We'll be telling you about things that are coming up in the future and that we're actively contributing to. This also leads on to opportunities that we have to study PhDs with us. We love PhD students, and we'll be very interested to hear from you if you are interested in doing a PhD with us. So very quickly, we have a kind of an overview of where some of our recent graduates have gone. Some big names up there, banking companies, pharmaceutical companies like GlaxoSmithKline, and commercial entities, Lockheed Martin. The NHS as well, the National Health Service in the UK, and manufacturers of devices and things like this. So we've got a very wide range of places that people can go, because computing applies to so many disciplines. Now we have some useful contact information here. Hopefully if you're able to grab the copy of this presentation, you'll be able to find this. If not, if there's anything that you want to contact us about, you definitely can find all this information on our website, okay? So I'd like to thank you very much for listening. I don't know, you may not have been listening, you may have been shouting all the time, but I haven't been able to hear. But thank you for your attention. I hope you've enjoyed the ideas that we've been talking about today. And in these sort of final 10 minutes, we'd be delighted to take questions from you. So please do feel free to type anything into the chat that you'd like to know. This can be about the subject of the talk that I was presenting to you today. Could be questions about the courses that we do, about how to apply or how to find out more information. And we'd be delighted to help you with those. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it, and please do get in touch with me if you want to discuss these things more with me. Thank you.